Okay, today's lesson is about life cycle assessment and how it relates to sustainability. So, sustainability obviously really important to preserve our resources in the planet and all that sort of stuff. So, we're going to understand what a life cycle assessment is used for, how it's used. We're going to analyze the sustainability of the different stages of a product that we're going to choose, and then we're going to evaluate a product and suggest how it could be more sustainable, taking in consideration the different stages. So there are two videos here. I'd like to take a moment just to pop off and watch them both. They're both pretty short, but they kind of give you an introduction as to what life cycle assessment is and kind of how it works. Once you've got that information, come back to this one and then we'll continue. So there we go. So having watched those videos, you know that life cycle analysis is helping to work out the impact of products on people and the environment and the different stages of a product's life cycle that allows you to make change at different stages to kind of make those incremental gains as far as the sustainability of a product is concerned. So there we go. So it's used to work out the impact of a product throughout its whole life. So there's no point in saying, oh, this is a really sustainable product, but it's really rubbish when you throw it away. It's not good to say, oh, actually, yeah, we're using sustainable materials for our product, but when we come to make it and put it into production, it uses an awful lot of power and energy, and therefore increases the carbon footprint. It's really important to really look at all the stages. So the first stage of those two products, obviously you have to extract the raw material. So obviously the shoe on the left, you'd have to get the fabric. So you need to harvest possibly cotton, if that's made of cotton. You need the little metal eyelets for the shoelaces to go through. You need to obviously extract and source the latex rubber for the sole and the toe section. Okay, so there's all sorts of different things. And on the phone, you have to find and source your metal ores to make the metal bit around the outside. You'd need to source the raw material for the screen and also the plastics that go inside to make the circuit boards, plus the copper, plus the semiconductor material to allow us to make the circuit boards inside, and all sorts of technology stuff. So that raw material stage for those two products is very different because of the number of components and the complexity of the components found in the phone. So here we go. So companies are being asked to account for the impact they're having on businesses, and businesses have to have on the environment. They have to calculate the environmental impacts at each stage. So that's those 5 stages there. Get used to those 5 stages. They don't change. Okay, so carbon footprint. This is how much energy or carbon dioxide is used up or produced. So the energy that you use, the electricity that you use, obviously burns fossil fuels or something similar to create the product, and maybe to use it depending on whether it uses energy or not. And then that's what we call the carbon footprint. Now, what companies have to do is they can offset their carbon dioxide production in a product by doing different things. They might plant trees. They might reduce the amount of energy used to create the product. All sorts of different things. And that is what's really, really important about this whole thing, because we're trying to reduce the impact that we have on the planet. So what you're going to do, we're going to go through one in a minute, but the worksheet basically is a guide of how to analyze a product, have a life cycle assessment on it. Okay, so we're going to go through one very quickly together on the next couple of slides, and then you're going to do your own one. Okay, here we go. So this is the first part. So we're going to look at a set of IKEA shelves. So you see the picture there of the shelves. You can see that they're wooden. We're just going to go for the basic shelves, not the wine rack bit or anything else. Just literally just the shelves, what's going on there. So it's relatively simple. So materials. So the first question that you ask yourself is, what materials were used to make it? And looking at the information on the internet or whatever, you can really see, you can work out and research where it's made from. So that's made from pine. Now, not only is it made from pine, the little parts that hold up the shelves are made of steel. So the little pegs that go in, they're made of steel. So there's two materials. And then what else does it have? It has some brackets on the back. So there's some metal brackets on the back, the little cross struts at the back that help stop it from falling down. And obviously there's some screws that go in there, so they're made of steel as well. So there you go, there's your two materials. We've got pine and we've got steel. Relatively straightforward, relatively simple. What impact did they have on the land and how were they processed? So the wood had to be cut down, and then they needed to be put to a lumber yard, and then cut down from trees into usable sections, and then the holes need to be drilled in them. So that's sort of more into the production section, but yeah, so the logs had to be treated, they had to be seasoned, so dried out so they're usable, and then they had to be passed on to the factory. Now the steel is different, so that has to be extracted from the ground, has to be purified using a lot of heat, a lot of energy, and then obviously that refined material is then passed on to the factory. Here we go, production. So how and where was it made? And what energy was involved in its manufacture. So we've discussed that actually drilling the holes in the wood need to happen, make sure it's the right size. So there's machines that do that. Obviously that can work relatively quickly and efficiently. And there's quite a lot of waste in there as well. So obviously you'd have your wood waste. So you kind of all that waste material, where does that go? Does that just go back round, or does it get thrown away or whatever? So that's something to think about and something to put in there. The steel obviously has to be sort of melted and forged into those little peg things that are in there. So there we go. That's another process. Again, if you start incorporating metal, that's a lot of heat that's involved. So therefore, the energy in that is huge. Once that's done, you can then move on to the movement around. So the question is, how and where was it made? So it was probably made in one single factory and shipped around the world, or do you think there's local factories that produce these to reduce the travel and the carbon footprint of the travel around the world to distribute these? Okay, moving on to distribution. So how is it distributed? Is it shipped? Is it flown? Is it done on trucks? So they all have their different fuel consumption and the amount that they can move. So if you go on a shipping container, really big shipping container, takes a long time to get somewhere, uses quite a lot of fuel, but you can move a lot of units. Also to do with how it's packaged as well, because these products obviously flat packaged, you can get a lot more in a container, and you can move a lot more of them for the fuel that you would use. If we flew these around the world, would the carbon footprint be higher? The answer is yes, because obviously planes use a lot more fuel. You can't carry heavy loads in planes as easily. So yeah, so that would be higher. And so generally people ship things, or they have local factories that sort of do the manufacturing of these, so they're nearer for the market. Okay, so product in use. How is it used? Does it last a long time? Does it use energy or batteries? That would make it worse for the environment, because obviously you have to replace those, or you have to charge it, and therefore it uses energy, therefore using a fuel source to generate that electricity. Does it last a long time? Would those shelves be long lasting? Yes, I'd say they would be. What would happen if you broke a piece? Could you buy a spare bit and repair it? Yes, you can with these, but some products you really can't. So therefore, you have to throw the whole thing out and buy a new one. So that's something to bear in mind and think about. Moving on. Okay, disposal. So when this product is completely finished with, you don't want it anymore, what do you do with it? Can you dispose of it by reusing it? Can you repurpose it for something else? Could you cut up the wood and use it for something? Could you take it to a charity shop and someone else could use it? Or would you have to take it to a landfill site and dump it in the dump, so therefore it does nothing else and it's no longer useful and rots down slowly over time? Could you recycle it? Could you take it to a centre where it recycles it? With wood, that's less likely. With the little steel parts, you could certainly sort of think about melting those down and doing them again. But again, is recycling the best way to use the resources? Probably not, because it uses more energy. So trying to reuse those parts, maybe those parts can go back to the factory or go back to the shop, and then they can use those as spare parts for other people who need to use those for new ones that they buy, perhaps. And also, how easily can the parts be taken apart? Because you can't recycle things and you can't dispose of things effectively if the parts are inseparable. So if they were glued together, if you have metal and wood glued together and you couldn't separate them very easily, then you can't really do anything with either of them. However, if you had if the metal pegs come out really easily, or you can unscrew the brackets, then you've separated your metal and you've separated your wood, and you can that's much more sustainable, because you can then put those materials in the correct place and recycle them or reuse them in certain ways. Okay, so that's how disposal works. Now, once you've done that on your version, the next section is to think about how you might reduce that impact. So what can you do to change it, to make it better for the environment? So there's some questions you need to kind of look at each stage and kind of go, well, at this stage you could do this to improve the carbon footprint of that product. At that stage you could change something up there as well. So here's some examples of how you could do that. Have a little read through, and that might help you think about what you could do in each stage of the product you've looked at in order to sort of really change things up. So I would have local factories to reduce the energy for transport. I would make sure I could take it apart easily. Again, the shelves that we looked at just then are pretty good, if I'm honest. There's very little I would change perhaps on how that works. And there are some sustainable companies you can look at, maybe research them, see what they do for theirs, and that might give you an idea.